replace it with nothing. But to be honest, we have to realize that if we got rid of the income tax with today's system, the deficit's going to go up. So in order to do this, we have to cut spending. And we start by that overseas spending. If we didn't have an income tax today, the federal government would still collect the same amount of revenues it collected 10 years ago. And don't you think that the government was plenty big enough 10 years ago? We've lived probably more than half our time in this country without an income tax. Up until 1913, no income tax. So it isn't the taxes are the issue, it's spending is the issue. And the question that we all have to ask, especially the next generation, the question that has to be asked and has to be answered. Because if we do nothing, the question will come anyway. But the question that the founders asked is, what should the role of government be? It's no more complex than that. And the role of government should be minimal. The role of government ought to be to protect our liberties. That's it. And if we had a society like that, we would have a free market. And then we would also feel an obligation to obey the law. The law is the Constitution. The Constitution is not a perfect document. It wasn't perfect at the beginning. Some people teach in school that you have to have a living, breathing document, which is an excuse for ignoring it totally. But it is a document that can be changed. And it was written that way. And I think the founders did a good job of that. We amend the Constitution when we want to change it. Just think, when they came in and decided, for various reasons, that we would not be in this country allowed to drink alcohol anymore. They had enough respect for the Constitution, they actually thought they had to amend the Constitution, which they did. Then they repealed it when they realized how bad it was. But they don't amend the Constitution anymore. I mean, under the Constitution, we shouldn't even have a Department of Education. The federal government shouldn't be. Under the Constitution, it's very clear. Only gold and silver is legal tender, and there is no authority for the Federal Reserve System.
Yeah!
One of the biggest disadvantages of a monetary system where government creates money out of thin air is the fact that it enhances the growth of government. So it's really a threat to liberty. The true believers in the gold standard believe in limited government. And in the early years when this was studied and debated in other campaigns, nothing in recent history, it was always working class people that liked sound money because they knew they wanted value when they got paid and they wanted to maintain its values. And it was the elite that liked inflation and still like inflation because inflation, when the government creates money, whoever gets the money first has the biggest advantage. So who gets the money first? Well, the politicians benefit because they vote for whatever the people want, and they spend it, and then they get re-elected. Then the money goes into the banking system. Banks love it, and then inflation bails out the banks when they get into trouble. The military-industrial complex loves it because they get the money. But what happens to the middle class? What happens to the average person after the money circulates and after it's discovered that there's a lot of dollars floating around out there? And that's what's happening today. Not only domestically have the people discovered there's a lot of dollars and pushing up prices, the world has discovered it and they're sending the dollars back home, and now we're having this inflation, the price inflation. And a characteristic of inflation that Austrian economics teaches is that when you wipe out a currency, you wipe out the middle class. And this is what's upsetting a lot of people today, why 90% of the American people aren't happy in the direction that we're going in. But in the early stages at least, and as long as they can keep it together until we have a real catastrophe, the transfer of wealth goes from the middle class to the wealthy. This is why you see Wall Street being bailed out. Even when they have a company that goes bad, you say, oh, the poor guy, the CEO is going to get fired. He only got $30 million severance pay. up because it's a tax, because the government printed the money and devalued the currency. So it is a tax. Even the poor who don't pay income taxes pay the inflation tax. It's a regressive, it's an evil tax, it's sinister, because a lot of people don't know how to understand it. Too often, even in Washington today, there's recent legislation saying what we have to do is have price fixing, set prices. Well, no, we need some fixing, but we need some fixing on controls on the Federal Reserve. That's what we need to fix. Freedom, I mentioned just briefly a little bit about personal liberty and economic liberty. And I think one of the problems we've gotten into in this country is 100 years ago or so, our political system got mixed up. And one half of the political system decided that personal liberty was worth defending but not economic liberty. And another group decided economic liberty was worth fighting for but not personal liberty. And what we need to do as a nation, and what our Constitution does, is bring this idea of liberty back together. It is only one issue. It's not two issues. And it has to start with an understanding of where our liberties come from. I happen to have a strong belief that our liberties come from our Creator because they come to us naturally, and we're born with our